Unfortunately, I had already cut out the foam pieces before I started recording the video. I'll put instructions at the end for those sizes. The first thing we need to do is cut out some V shapes in the foam where we'll put the fiberglass rods for support. One on each wing. I'm doing these about 2 inches from the edge of the wing. That's the width of my ruler. And a line at a 45-degree angle just into the foam, the thickness of the fiberglass rods, or the depth of the fiberglass rods. Do 2 of those, peel the foam out, check that the fiberglass We're also going to create an A-frame with a fiberglass rod across between the other 2 that are coming in on the sides of the wing, or aligned with the edges of the wing. For this particular plane, I actually did 3 fiberglass rods crossways on the wing because I knew I was going to cut out a center section for the battery and some of the electronics to cut down on the wind resistance of those being too high up above the wing when I was flying. With the power of the motor that I'm going to put on this wing, this wasn't really necessary, and if this is your first build, I wouldn't do that. I would just leave the wing cut out as per the instructions, which I'll put up later, and just mount your electronics on top of it. Here I'm cutting out the spot for the electronics out of the foam. I made a couple mistakes and had to make several cuts, and in the end I decided to just separate this into 3 different chunks, one which would hold on the motor mount and the other 2 chunks which go along the edge of the wing. The motor mount, which you'll see in a second, is just a piece of angle metal, 90-degree angle metal that I picked up from Home Depot. I think it cost me about 75 cents. It seems to hold the motor well, and I fit it in between 2 pieces of foam with Gorilla Glue in between. You'll see that coming up as soon as I finish cutting out this section of the foam. This video, by the way, is sped up 5 times from the original. I didn't feel like posting an 1.5-hour video on YouTube. You can see now the back piece where I'm going to mount the motor mount. At this point I'm getting ready to glue the pieces on. I'm starting with the motor mount piece, and then I'll also put glue on the side pieces. I let the glue dry overnight after putting it on. And I put some medium weights on top of it, nothing too heavy to crush the foam, but heavy enough to compress, because the type of glue I'm using, it's a Gorilla Glue-like glue, and it expands. So if you don't put something on top of it, it'll just push the foam apart and it won't be as strong. The motor that I have on here is a Turnigy 2836 1100 kV motor. I think it does 336 watts, if I remember correctly, and 18 amp draw. So this makes an ideal motor for this type of plane. It's nice and efficient, and it's got plenty of power for takeoff and cruising. It's not going to make it into an absolute rocket ship, but it will be fast enough. Okay, here I'm cutting down the angles of the front of the wing. Again, I'm going to angle on the top and bottom of the wing equally. Here I've done just a little bit less than a 45-degree angle. You could go a little bit further back on the wing if you wanted to maybe halfway, the halfway point of the extension on the airfoil. But this seems to work quite well. And even if you look at that, you'll notice that my cuts aren't particularly accurate or even. It really doesn't matter all that much. I'm going to end up sanding that and taping it, and in the air, it flies just fine. I've decided to go with a red and white scheme for this plane. What I found in the past when I use two darker colors, when the plane gets high enough in the air or far enough away, it all looks black. So with a red and white, the white really shows up against the light. So I put the white side up and the red side down. And the contrast is enough for me to figure out whether the plane's flying upside down and which way I'm turning when I'm at a fair distance from myself. There's a fair bit of time here invested in actually taping the foam. It probably would have been easier to tape the bottom half of the foam first before putting it all together, and maybe even the front part of the wing for the top half before putting it together, but I was just kind of winging it here. Even sped up 5 times, it's painful to watch. It's a slow process taping, but really in real terms, it was probably 15 minutes spent taping, which isn't terrible. I'll be flipping it over and start to tape the sides of the wing with the white tape. You'll notice that partway through that I turned the camera off to spare you the pain of watching me tape the other side of the wing, and then skipped straight to putting the electronics on. One thing that I do still need to do on this before putting the electronics on is obviously tape the elevons on so that I have control surfaces. That part should be coming up soon. The elevons on, but you can't see it because the camera isn't angled far enough down. But it's a very simple. I just butt it up against the edge of the wing and put a layer of tape across it. Doing a pretty ugly job of taping the center section. This is the first wing I've done like this with a cutout center section. And packing tape isn't very good at going around corners. As you can see, I've now finished taping both sides of the wing. The elevons are on, and I'm now starting to mount servos. I've mounted the control horns already to the back, and I'm using Turnigy Metal Gear 9 gram. I think they're advertised as 9 gram. They might be slightly heavier than that servos. I think these come in at about $5 a piece. I decided to go with Metal Gear servos and slightly better control horns on this one because I think this will ultimately be the plane that I put all my more expensive FPV gear on, and I don't want to lose that because I cheaped out for $2 on a servo. That being said, I've never had the HXT 900s that I usually use. I've never had one fail. I use a Z-bend tool to create my control lines. And a servo tester to make sure that my servos are in the correct position before I mount them so that my control surfaces are nice and straight. I mounted the servo on to the wing using double-sided indoor-outdoor carpet tape, and when I'm all done I'll put a couple dabs of hot glue beside them as well just to hold them a little bit sturdier in place. I have several of these wings that I built using just the carpet tape, and I've never had a servo come off yet, but still I feel a little bit better with the dab of hot glue. I wish I'd recorded this at a slightly different angle so you could see a little bit better exactly what's going on here. The drilling is just enlarging holes a little bit on the servo arms and on the control horns so that the wire, I have a fairly thick wire that I use. It's survey wire. It comes with a little orange flag on it from Home Depot. I think you get them in packages of 10 for a little over $2. And I find they make excellent, nice, stiff control rods. And they're inexpensive. They bend well, and they don't have too much flex in them. They're good. Looks like I just put the prop on, and I'm almost ready to do some testing. Tightening up the prop adapter, and at some point here I should be using some blue thread lock on the screw for the front of the prop adapter. I have had these come loose in the past. This prop that I have on this plane is not a reverse prop, which means that I'm going to have my motor spinning in the wrong direction, which means that the prop adapter, that screw at the end of it, would come off eventually if I didn't use thread lock on it. I really should have a reverse prop, but I didn't have one in the 9x6 size that I wanted to try out on this motor. There we go, my Turnigy 9X transmitter. Testing things out. See that I've got lots of thrust. It's all good. Disconnect. And I think now I'm doing a test. This is just really playing around at this point, connecting two batteries up in parallel. Getting myself ready for a longer range FPV flight that probably won't happen until the spring. But I will do a short range before too long. At this point, apart from taping down the receiver and the ESC is a 25 amp HobbyKing SS series ESC. The receiver on there is a HobbyKing 6-channel, the kind that'll bind to the Turnigy 9X. Just got to make sure that those are nice and secure for my first flight. And there we go. The last piece of the puzzle is the winglets. I like to have the kind that go above and below because, as you can see, the 3 wings in the background, it's nice and easy to store the wings standing up. They don't take up as much space. I suppose you could do a vertical takeoff. I've had one successful vertical takeoff with one of these wings, and I've had many failures. So obviously I'm not quite skilled enough yet for that. But someday. I find hand launching these wings is pretty easy. The technique I use for hand launching is I hold the wing in my right hand, my right arm extended. I apply the throttle enough so that I can feel it pushing against me, and I have my thumb facing down, my fingers over the top of the wing, and then a slow motion forward with my right arm, and that gives me enough time to get back on the controls and adjust before the wing hits the ground, basically. I find this much easier than trying to toss it like a football, and much easier than trying to toss it side hand like a frisbee. Gluing the winglets on, but you can't see it because it's above the camera. Maybe about another 15 seconds of this, and then we should be able to see something again. Well, not much. All you can see is the wire from my hot glue gun. I'm using a combination of hot glue and Gorilla Glue on the winglets. Basically, what I do is I hot glue in 2 or 3 spots and Gorilla Glue the rest, and the hot glue kind of leaves it tacked in place while the Gorilla Glue has time to solidify. Little water, because you're supposed to use that with Gorilla Glue. And move the camera so you can see the second winglet going on. And just trying to weigh it down. That's pretty much the end of the build video. I'll show a quick clip of it flying immediately following. So this is just a short clip of the first FPV flight I had with the wing. That was later on. I let it dry overnight, the winglets, and the next morning I took it out for a maiden. This is actually the second flight. The maiden, I just wanted to make sure it was seaworthy, so to speak, before I put my FPV gear on it, and it was. So I went out later that afternoon, threw it in the air, and had a fantastic time flying a little bit of FPV and a little by line of sight. This first minute or so of the video is me watching the plane and Stacy wearing the FPV goggles, and then we switch places. She puts the video sunglasses on, and I put the Fat Shark Predators on and fly around FPV.
tell me when it starts crackling.
Little crackle there. The sun is in my eyes, but I can still see. And I'm going to hurl.
Still see?
Mm-hmm.